Welcome to another episode of Faith-Infused Leadership, where we dig into lessons that can help all leaders, regardless of the industry. This particular podcast is a replay from our first season, as it is still relevant today. Thank you so much for listening, and get ready for another jam-packed episode. Please do us a favor and leave us a rating and review, and let us know how we are doing. Episode of Faith Infused Leadership. I am your co-host Meredith Banka, here with your host Debbie Heiser of Three Vines Consulting. Debbie, I am so looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today. This is going to be amazing.
It is going to be amazing, and especially after listening to the one 2 weeks ago with Dr. Horsman and all of his wisdom nuggets. I have a few things I'm going to add into this one that refer to some of those pieces. So if you didn't catch that one, make sure you go back and listen to that one after you listen to this one.
Yeah, that was an incredible episode with him. And it's led us to the conversation today, which is really around the importance of healing, specifically for a leader. So you had some really profound things that you were sharing with me around how important it is to heal as a leader, and a recent experience that you had that you wanted to share.
I do. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. Interestingly enough, I was approached with attending a 3.5-day retreat just this last weekend, which would be a couple of weeks from when everyone's listening. And I've been introduced to this for quite a while, but just didn't really have an interest in it. And there was a last minute opening. So I said, sure, let's do it. And I'm going through some personal things. And I thought this would be good. I really didn't know what to expect. I knew it was a little bit about learning to love and love yourself, which is something I talk about, that it's important that we love ourselves in order to love our neighbors. And it was interesting because this thought of healing keeps coming up to me in the respect that, you know, Dr. Horsman even mentioned this and talked about the importance of listening, and that when we listen, we become aware. And in order to listen internally to our mind and our heart and our soul, our spirit, it is important to slow down. And so part of that healing journey and what I've experienced is it's important for me to be open to heal some of the things that have hurt my heart, and to be in touch with my heart, not just my mind. We tend to stay up here a lot as leaders. But to be able to be in touch with my heart and those emotions and that hurt, and be able to heal, because I can't help other people heal and serve other people if I'm not doing some of that work myself. I know sometimes when you say doing the work, that can scare people, and people wonder what that's all about. And, you know, sometimes that's just simply going to a counselor. Sometimes that's just realizing, like after my mother passed away, that I just had a really heavy heart, and I needed some support during that time. I needed people to intercede for me and pray, because I was very angry at God. And, you know, like understanding and having some of that awareness to heal. And one of the things that really resonated with me, and I've talked about this before, and I have a very strong value around everything comes from either love or fear. And when we are in a fear mode, we're reacting. When you think about in leadership capabilities, I think back to some of my experiences. And when I was leading out of fear, it usually created chaos. It created mistrust amongst people. And so anytime that those feelings are within a culture, even within a team, it's important to look at, where is that coming from? And where is that fear at? So that you can start to look at that and change that to a culture of love.
Well, and there's so much fear in the workplace right now. I mean, the statistics are overwhelming with the number of people who, I think the last I saw, it was 46% of people go to work every day in America with fear of being fired.
Yeah.
And the, you know, financial and economic repercussions that would have for their family. But that means even if you are the best leader, 50% of the people that you are leading on a daily basis are afraid they're going to be fired. That doesn't layer in those that are afraid of failing or that demands are too high. So fear is rampant.
It is rampant. And, you know, Meredith, I find it really sad. And I'm not saying that I do this 100% of the time in any way, shape, or form. But when you think about love, love builds trust. Love is about forgiveness. It's about hope and peace and harmony. And even, outside the workplace, leading in your community, leading in a nonprofit, even, it's hard because there is so much mistrust in the world today. There's so much unrest about everything. And the interesting thing is, and I was reminded of this actually in a discussion around, and even Dr. Horsman pointed to this, that every transformation, every bit of healing comes from a spiritual place. And when you have that spiritual place, when you're running in fear, it's like, right? But if you stop yourself long enough even to look at history. Now, I'm not saying I've led a blessed life. I'm not saying that bad things don't happen. Bad things happen. They happen to me even. But if you can look back into your history and look at it in a love situation, there is this law of abundance where this mental shift, and I don't mean abundance in money, abundance means a lot of things, that when you're looking at serving other people, when you're looking at outside of yourself, right? You love yourself, so you're looking outside of yourself to serve other people. It switches you into that love mode. And history says where you're at today, you've gotten there somehow.
Right.
I mean, some of us may have had to kick and scream and hurt people along the way, which I'm not necessarily condoning to do that. But what I'm saying is you're in the place you're in today because of something that's happened in your history, and you're okay. You're alive. And ultimately our critter brain puts us into fear because we think our life is in danger. And therefore we need to, what is that? Fight or
fight or flight.
Thank you. Fight or flight mode. And if we can switch ourselves into that love mode, and it goes back to the whole thought I had about K-Screw Radio and K-Love Radio, and just being aware enough to catch yourself. I was talking to a client earlier this week and I said, celebrate for a minute that you identified that you were squirreling out and kind of going into this negative place within an hour, where before it would have taken you weeks to realize that. And so I also feel like fear sometimes puts us into that judgmental place, which I want to talk about something that when you go into that judgmental place, there was a TV show on years ago on like the WB channel or some kind of weird off channel where this woman had people living in her head on a couch, and all these people had to interact and decide who was going to be the one that reacted or acted.
Right.
To the movie, I think it's In and Out or something with the emotion.
Inside Out.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
But a little different. And we do have a committee in our head. And that committee consists of 4 people. There's our little child heart, which is really our heart space. Because if you think about children, and I love watching children because they're just so free typically, and they might get mad at their friend, but in 2 seconds they're over it and they move on and life is good. Or, they just are in touch with those emotions. And then you have your adolescent. And the adolescent really is, if you think about your adolescence, somewhere in there, you might have been the perfect child, but somewhere in there, right? I say that sarcastically. There's some kind of rebellion that goes on, right? And so that adolescent will pop up, and when we react to something in an ego type of way, that's your adolescent. And then when we have, anytime I'm critical of myself, anytime I'm saying I should do this, or I shouldn't eat that, or I should go work out, or I need to do this, that's a critical parent in our head. Now, again, I'm not suggesting parents are to blame. Parents do the best they can with what they have, and if they knew better, they'd do better. And believe you me, I've thought about things that I've done to potentially harm my child and or give him some positive attributes too, right? Because when you say you screwed me up, you also have to say thank you, because there's a lot of really good things you get from
right.
it. But anyway, you have that critical parent that's in your head too. And then you have the mature adult, that whole adult that really needs to manage those other 3. They all 4 have a role in our lives, but it's a matter of having the adults filter them and be able to manage in an avenue of love. Because the critical parent and the adolescent typically come from an avenue of fear.
Which makes a lot of sense. I mean, and if we think about that in relationship to what we see in the workplace and what we see in ourselves as leaders, I feel like in a leadership position, oftentimes people are outwardly showing that mature adult, but inwardly feeling that fear-driven child, right? Because they have pressure coming from the top, or they're needing to bring results, or whatever it may be. And so that's a very interesting dynamic to consider when it comes to how we choose to lead in our lives, whether that be at work or in general. And you were sharing with me that you really stepped into some of that at this retreat that you were on. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
I will just share. I'm going to be a little bit vague, just because I am still processing some of that. But I think what happened was the experiences, and honestly, even being with a group of people that were also experiencing some pain and digging into some of those emotions. And I know as an executive in 2 different companies, at Sprint Publishing and at Citibank, I learned very quickly, particularly 20 years ago, that you don't show the feminine side very often. You don't show the emotion. You hide that in. And so I also think, I'm not making this a man or woman thing, but I also think men struggle with this because in society, our societal systems don't make it safe for men to show emotion. Right. And typically when they do show any kind of sadness or that they have fear, they're made fun of. There's a great documentary out there called, I think it's The Mask We Live In. And it's about men and boys in society and the cycle that we're creating of men that are not emotionally available because we teach them not to be. And so when I think about the experience that I just had, it was actually going in and waking up my heart, waking up that small child within, and remembering that it's important. Even Dr. Horsman talks about letting go and letting come. And I can't let go of I can't let something else come in until I let go of some of the past hurt that has happened that potentially even shifted my thought about my identity and who I am and what I am and how I maneuver in this world. And so, and I had an immediate response, Meredith. It was so mind-boggling. So I let go of a lot of different things. And I really, not to scare people about this 3-day, but I am not one that typically shows a lot of emotion, and I struggle crying. I cried more this weekend, and it wasn't like pain crying all the time, but just crying and cleansing, and doing some of that hard work of looking at some of those things. So Monday morning, I'm tired. We didn't get done until probably 8:30 Sunday night. And I stopped into my favorite place, which is right next to Starbucks here. And they have the best bacon in town. And I wouldn't know that they sell bacon for $1 a slice. So I go in and I decide, I know, I find these little niche.
Where is that?
In Sandpoint, Idaho. And so basically I thought, you know what, I am ravished. I have not been that hungry the last few weeks. And I was so hungry. I thought I'm going to order breakfast. So I ordered breakfast and I said, I'm going to run across the street and get my coffee. So I run across, not across the street, but right next door to grab my coffee. And I see a friend of mine that I hadn't seen in a while. So I walked back to talk to her before I ordered my coffee. And out comes Marissa, the beautiful little barista at Starbucks, and she hands me a coffee because I get the same thing all the time, a decaf almond milk latte. And she comes back and I said, oh, I didn't order that yet. And she's like, I know, you just look like you needed a coffee today. And so she gave me the coffee. I got it for free. And while I'm sitting there, Marissa starts to walk off, and Austin comes over from Spuds because he sees me in the window because my order had been sitting there for a little bit, and brings it to me in Starbucks. And I'm like, it's a small minor thing, but I'm like, here is an example of when I let go and I'm not so focused internally on personal things that are happening to me, and I'm looking externally at other people and showing and demonstrating love to other people, how it comes back to you tenfold.
Mm-hmm.
And, Dr. Horsman just barely touched on this serving other people. And that's really what it's about. And not serving other people at the expense of you. And I think that's where I'm not one on balance. I think we set ourselves up for failure when we talk about balance, which is in an earlier podcast. But it's really about, in this case, it is about making sure we're within the 80-20 rule, right? The 20% kind of give and take of balancing, making sure that we are taking care of ourselves, doing the healing, doing that work so that we can go out and serve other people as leaders.
I had a mentor ask me this week, what do you want to be known for? Because we were having a conversation around someone who was bringing some behaviors that just immediately my reaction is like, I just zero tolerance, right? For these behaviors. Yet other leaders I'm around are very accepting of these behaviors and think that they're great. And, I was reminded again, like you don't always get to pick who you get to be around. Right. And so my mentor said to me, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be known? And my answer was exactly about this kind of thinking, right? I wanted to be known for kindness, for listening, for love, for humility, for all of those things that were really kind of the antithesis of how this other person was choosing to show up. Right. And she said, well, then just choose that, and it's again, when we were talking with Dr. Horsman, it made me think of that exact thing of, clearly someone else's leadership style, clearly that may represent love to a person, to someone else. And that's maybe why they're finding success, and it doesn't resonate with me. And that's okay. I don't have to say yes to that. What I can choose to say yes to is how I'm going to lead and how I'm going to do those things. And it just really plays into this letting go, letting come. Yeah. So I love that you're sharing with us how these little things, it's the little things, that can sometimes be demonstrating that right in front of our eyes. But if we're too caught in fear, we can't even see them. It's probably a conversation we can have around gratitude and leadership at some point too. But I think it's related.
I think so too. And Meredith, it's embarrassing to admit this, but I've been going in this restaurant for more than a year, but at least a year. They call me the bacon lady. And, they don't even know my name. And Austin brought this over and I didn't even know his name. For a year, I'd been buying bacon from him. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? I've been so internally focused. And it just was such a good reminder that part of that is that healing and understanding, and moving forward and doing that work and being really solid. I've talked about the vase that Rachel Hollis talks about before with the never ending water, and standing firm in that and standing firm in that love. And so I looked at him and I said, I'm embarrassed to say I don't know your name. And so, it's even those little things when you say seeing them, like seeing those people that you lead. And it's not all about the work that has to be done. It's about knowing them as people. Dr. Horsman talks about relationship being the most important thing in leadership. And that is so true. And that could be another topic too. Maybe that's one we do next month.
For
gratitude and leadership and relationships. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love this idea of healing as a leader, because I think there are times as a leader where I felt like I needed to be perfect. And I realized I placed that on myself. There wasn't anybody, telling me, hey, be perfect today.
Well, actually, that was your critical parent telling you.
Probably, but there wasn't anybody on the outside saying, hey, today's the day, be perfect today. And I think when we do that, we don't allow ourselves to believe that we need to heal or that there's time for healing because we're too busy being perfect. So,
and I think too, Meredith, we fall into this trap, and I see it a little bit more. I don't want to place blame on social media. That's not part of it. But we have this victim game, right? That plays with the victim and the persecutor and the rescuer. And what happens is we start to play that game even internally in our own head, and we think we can get ourselves out of it. that we don't need to ask for help, that asking for help is weakness. And, Einstein even said, you can't solve a problem with the same people that created the problem.
Right.
Basically, you need to be able to ask people to help you and to say, help me figure out where I'm at in this situation and give me input or feedback. And, even as a leader, there are great assessment tools out there, these 360 profilers, all these different things that will gather feedback from colleagues and peers and people that report to you, as well as your managers, that allow you to have that rich feedback to even see where some of those strengths are that you have and where you might need to heal.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for bringing us to this type of conversation around leadership. Because I don't believe it's typical, and I feel like it's so needed and so valuable for everyone that's been able to listen in today. So if someone wanted to know a little bit more about what you do or about Three Vines Consulting, where can they find more information?
Yeah, the biggest recommendation I have would be to go out to my website at www.3v-consulting.com. And then I would say too, look up in Facebook and Instagram and follow. There's other things that I put out there that are not on the website that are pretty valuable pieces of information as well.
Awesome. Well, for this episode of Faith Infused Leadership, I am your co-host, Meredith Banka, here with your host, Debbie Heiser, and we'll see you again the next time. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.